Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. I will be using this video to tell you why Alpine made the right choice to sign Jack Doohan and also what to make of Franco Colapinto now joining Williams on a very short notice. But of course on this channel we focus on all things European junior racing, so naturally we begin at the very bottom of the ladder. Today, the bottom step of said ladder is actually well down in mini karting, as the IAME Euro series had its fourth and final round, so I thought it's at least a championship you should be aware of because, you know, the top dogs do tend to be quite quick. In the minis, we've had shocking weekends for Babicek, Priam, Granqvist, Bobrysov and a couple more names, which sort of made for a not quite as exciting final as we potentially could have had. But it still left us with an excellent duel between Will Green and Jarlath Sayer, two of the top British minicar drivers going up in two British teams, so you know, very fitting duel there. And it was a nice final as well. Sayer did manage to pull off the race-winning overtake on track, but Will Green just about secured the title by getting onto the podium, so fair enough, great racing from the pair really. I do want to highlight an entirely different driver though, because actually Daniel Miron Lorente, DML as he's also known as, did compete as a one-off in this round, and he is usually one of the stars in all things WSK competition, and he also showed why he's one of these stars here. He just about didn't get the win in the final. Sayer, as I said, found the race winning move, but he basically won everything else this weekend and was a very close second, and also got up to P9 in the championship with just this one-off appearance. So out of all of these names, this is really the man you want to have on your radar, in my opinion. In the juniors, we can make it very quick because here Harrison Mackie is the star of the series, no doubt about it. And actually he is the star of the series to such an extent that his points lead was so high that he actually didn't bother doing the superheat and the final because as they put it on the broadcast, a disqualification could have cost him the title, but everything else meant he already had it locked in. So he played it safe and saved some cash on the way by not even participating. He is also more or less dominating the IAME Junior portion of the British Karting Championship. So definitely a British rising star you should be aware of. And then last but not least, in the seniors with the adults racing, we had Fionn McLaughlin, who we haven't really talked about yet here, but he has obviously recently been announced as a member of the Red Bull Junior team. So finally, someone will lift him out of karting into Formula 4 for next season. And so he ended his karting career. Well, I guess he'll do the World Championship later in the year, but this portion of his karting career has ended in the most McLaughlin way possible by losing the title because he had a puncture before the final even started, resulting in a DNS. Very sad, and if you've followed McLaughlin a little bit, he has been incredibly unlucky over these last 2 years. He's lost so many potential big results with random mechanical problems and stuff, things entirely outside of his control. So I really hope he has used up all of his bad luck before stepping into F4, so maybe he can have a very good year right out of the gate next season. Him not participating in the final actually gave another guy you should be familiar with from the junior formulas a chance to win the title, and that is Marcus Luzio, who's actually very competent in these senior races usually, but here he couldn't quite seize the opportunity presented by McLaughlin. Not participating, he did actually take the lead briefly early on and looked set for a very good result, but ultimately he couldn't quite hang at the very front. I believe he dropped to around P5 and thus conceded not the race win, but the title to Italian Danny Caranini. Unfortunately, at least for us junior series fans, that's not too relevant because he's already 28 years old. But because we had the discussion on the Reddit, I do want to point out that actually these adults participating in the series, in my opinion, is what gives the series such a prestige in these junior categories, in these senior categories. For example, compared to the OK seniors on the FA European side of things, where yeah, actually it is mostly kids competing against each other. Here they have to prove themselves against essentially what are the professional karting drivers, if there is such a thing. There's a lot of other cool names we could have in here. I've got my fingers crossed for Clement Outram to eventually give his single-seater debut, but that is a story for another time. For now, we switch our focus to car racing. Our single-seater racing of the week mainly consisted of a lot of F4 level competition, and the most important one of those is the first round of the Euro 4 series. Obviously the I guess extension of Italian F4, realistically you could call it. And this was a really interesting build-up over the weekend, partly affected by tyre concerns, where we had a pretty dull first race, nobody really risking much, not many moves made. Then a very racy second race and a bit of a wreckfest race in the third one. So, you know, we did check all of these boxes. And remarkably, this time Prema looked entirely on the back foot compared to both us Racing and Van Amersfoort all weekend long, really. Even Freddie Slater only scored a single podium, which, at least by the looks of it, in this race he did show his class. He absolutely dominated his Prema teammates in particular. But I do want to highlight in the third race the roles were a little reversed, so I think he just had fresh tyres compared to his mates in the second race to get that good result, and then obviously at the short end of that stick in the other race. So I don't even know how excited we should be getting about this result. The story of the weekend really was all about us and Van Amersfoort, and the man of the weekend was Akshay Bora with a pair of strong wins. And then yes, he had the bad tyres in the second race, so he couldn't really do much there, which, you know, further indicates that the Slater theory is probably correct and it was mostly due to tyres. For Akshay Bora, I think he is a very interesting character because he's obviously clearly quick. He showed it last year, he shows it this year. He can absolutely drive, but he always fell a little short of actually getting the results yet. Of course, he's very young and everything, but yeah, this is the sort of weekend which I would have maybe expected a tiny bit earlier, but I am really glad it happened now, and maybe he can fulfill his potential in this series and actually be in the title fight proper, which for the Italian F4 he has just started a little too slow, although everybody has started a little too slow compared to Freddie Slater, I suppose. Yamakoshi also deserves some continued recognition for dominating the second race beyond belief, but obviously he has been a force to be reckoned with all year long, really. Honorable mention goes out to the Genser camp and Ethan Isher in particular, because these guys did play all of their cards right compared to the normally, you know, stronger front-running teams, and actually managed to get both of their drivers high up the order in the second race. And Isher actually outdid himself outright by scoring a podium, and I believe Emil Frey did come in like P8 or something, so still a very, very good result for the usually slightly struggling Genser camp. Onto the proper FIA-backed F4 series, but here unfortunately I do have bad news, because British F4, while I now have access to actually watch the races, hashtag thank you Wes, put it in the comments, but unfortunately we had 4 races this weekend and they did only broadcast one, and truth be told, if they can't be asked to take their own series seriously, I won't either, because yeah, I'm not going to discuss the result of 4 races based on a single one. We'll save that for another time when the broadcasters actually respect their own junior drivers. Instead, we can focus on the French F4, which is a, you know, not quite as high level, but I suppose very similar level series to the British F4. And here we have an absolutely epic title fight still. Yanni Stevenheydens, Jules Caranta, they keep trading blows with a win each, and Stevenheydens now just about back in the championship lead. But man, yeah, these two going at it is really good to watch. Fighting on track and in the championship standings consistently, race after race, round after round, truly beautiful to watch if you ask me. There is still a third man sort of lurking in the background, because consistency is still king for Taito Kato. While he's not the, you know, a front-running force like the other two, or a consistent race win threat, I suppose, he is still very much in the conversation just by being there weekend after weekend to, you know, pick up the pieces essentially. Unfortunately, the other people sort of in the conversation early in the season have now officially dropped off a cliff, and the most important one of these is Chester Kiffer, in my opinion, where he looked so strong early on with very little experience as well, but for some reason it has not translated into the second half of the season at all, and he is now struggling to even, you know, make a dent in the top 10, never mind actually score good points. So a bit of a sad one there. There's my personal story of the season in French F4 though, and for those of you who've seen me on the subreddit, you may be aware of what's coming now, and this is Lisa Billard has finally had her debut last week, and Lisa Billard is one of the most exciting female prospects, if you ask me, just period. I do think she is very talented, and unlike some of the other girls popping up here and there, I think she can actually make a dent in some of these junior series properly. Now, it was a debut, there was nothing to write home about at all. She was driving around at about P20, she did get caught up in some of the chaos as is expected, but really her real test will come next season, so I just hope she, learned a lot this time out, and I think maybe she'll surprise us towards the end of the season, but if she won't, then watch out next year. Just believe me, she'll be there eventually. I don't see her obviously as a huge title favorite or anything. This would be unrealistic, but I do think she can, at least in the French F4, maybe be a consistent point scorer or something along those lines, Last but not least, shout out to German competitor Montego Maaßen. Finally a weekend at the sharp end with 2 top 5 finishes. This should have happened a lot sooner in the season, so not really much to get excited about, but hey, still, you have to take them as they come. And also Matilda Putz got closer to the points, at least this time around, after I called her out last time, so, there is that as well. Going on to the Indian F4, and here once again it is a series I won't be covering, at least not this weekend, because I guess it's 50-50 on me and the organizer. It was broadcast, but only accessible when watching live. I tend to watch VODs, especially for F4 level series, so yeah, I just didn't catch them in time. My bad, I suppose. I'll try to catch them live next week if possible. The entry list looks a lot more spicy than last year. Also, they do more than a single track this year, so all in all, I am excited for the Indian F4, even if it's not reflected in this particular episode just yet. We will get there eventually. Instead, just as we were talking about Lisa Billard and Matilda Putz, we can talk about some female racing in F1 Academy. Finally back, and here it is Dori Pin, finally back on the top step, winning the second race from pole position. Unfortunately, yes, in the first race she did get a bit of a curious jump start penalty. There was a couple almost odd jump start penalties, but I mean, that is besides the point really. The championship fight itself is obviously more or less over already, with Abby Pulling just controlling that thing start to finish there. Still no proper competition on the points side of things, but on a pleasant note, it's that Prema as a whole, I think, looked a lot better this weekend, and that's not just showcased by Dori Pin actually putting up a proper fight again, but also Maya Wurch this time was on the sort of form I would have expected going into the season. Obviously, if you recall the start of the year, I think she was a very clear-cut third best coming into this. The first round seemed to reflect this assessment, and then it went downhill from there for various reasons. This time around, she was very much not just the third quickest driver on average, but critically also she was one of those pulling clear from the pack and going with Dori and Abby instead of dropping back into the midfield. So very much living up to her potential there in that sense. Last but not least, again, the obligatory shout out, and here actually to wildcard driver Nina Gateman. First time one of the wildcard drivers actually did something noteworthy, and obviously she's doing the British F4 on the side and never really impressed me there. I guess getting the Zandvoort experience a couple of weeks ago definitely helped, but she was actually competing for best of the rest in both of these races, so at the P5-ish segment of the grid. Obviously, again, I suppose aided by Prema actually having their shit together this weekend, but still I thought something worth mentioning. Anyway, let's go on to the faster cars, and by faster cars I mean, let's go to the news. Formula 1 at Zandvoort should have been a good race. Unfortunately, I have to say, the race itself was a little dull, not much happening. Really happy for Norris' second win, but otherwise there's not much to talk about, at the very least for me, I don't think. So instead, I want to use this segment to highlight the news. First up, Jack Doohan announced as an Alpine driver. They finally decided who will replace outgoing Esteban Ocon for next season. And in my opinion, Jack Doohan is absolutely the correct choice to make here. Yes, there was the debate between should they take Mick Schumacher. In my opinion, that would have been a pretty big mistake and just screaming a lack of, not only a lack of ambition, but also a lack of trust into their own programs. Because Jack Doohan was obviously Alpine affiliated for quite a while, and critically, he was arguably, maybe not the best, but one of the top drivers last season in F2 period. You can certainly make a case for him as the best driver in the second half of last year's F2 season. And in the first half, he had big car and chassis issues. So really someone whose final results do not quite reflect what he was actually doing on track. Therefore, he is certainly a competent driver, even if you only look at Wikipedia and say, oh, he didn't even finish in the top 2 in F2. He can drive, no worries there. Yes, I do not expect him to be like a world beater or anything. I don't think he is like a big protege. Let's just put it this way, he won't be a Piastri who steps in the car and immediately, puts himself into the conversation of like an upper midfield kind of driver. When will he start fighting Norris? These kind of things. Wouldn't expect any of that. Fortunately, he's in a midfield car. He's going up against a midfield driver in Pierre Gasly. And I think this is right around the level where he should do a very solid job, depending on preferences and politics. Hey, maybe he's only around for 2 years. Maybe he can have a 10-year career somewhere in the midfield. Time will tell. But I think this pickup was super critical just to showcase that Alpine actually cares about their own junior programs and doesn't just put in a former Mercedes and Ferrari affiliated guy just because he has experience and some connections. I think this is critical to give faith to their own junior program at this point in time, because obviously they've got lots of talented people under contract. Alpine is using a bit of a shotgun approach like Red Bull and signs a lot of different people. And this only makes sense if you actually have the intention to promote them at some stage. Otherwise, it's just a bit of a waste of time and money for everyone involved, if you ask me. The second set of news, and this one, direct result of what happened on the weekend with Logan Sargeant totaling his newly upgraded Williams and the team immediately replacing him after the weekend. This was an absolute shocker. Not the replacing part of it. I think at this point, getting rid of Sargeant, it hurts. I was one of those people to say he definitely deserved to have this second year, in my opinion, because he was promoted early. Williams knows he was promoted early. All of this makes sense, but he has not shown the progress you would expect from a guy in his second season who knows that he needs to perform now. So I think getting rid of him makes perfect sense. Could have maybe happened a couple rounds earlier. That's now in the past. It doesn't really matter now. But the replacement is a bit of a shock with Franco Colapinto coming in. Now, this is a double-edged sword in my opinion, because on the one hand, they're doing the same again. They are now once again promoting a guy too early, in this case not even with a full F2 season under his belt. So that's a bit of a big question mark if your goal was to just get consistent results now. Maybe actually Schumacher would have been the better option here. Critically though, I think putting in Colapinto is fantastic for Colapinto despite him not being fully ready, just because we know how important it is to get your foot in the door. Once you've proven yourself in a couple F1 races, if you're not called Liam Lawson, this technically means teams will just come back to you and remember that, yeah, you've driven the car already, you've showed up, you've not binned it too many times. So if he can come in and just do a solid job, not in terms of pace, not in terms of rivaling Albon, just in terms of executing your strategy and keeping the car out of the wall and, bringing it home in P18 or whatever the car is supposed to finish. I think this is perfect for him. He won't be driving next year. This is the most curious part of this. Obviously, Williams has their driver pairing locked in for next season. But I think the theory of him then taking up a reserve role instead of going back to F2, this is actually brilliant. Essentially, for his career, this could mean he doesn't have to rely on getting a good F2 result because of this door opening now. So I think that's brilliant. And if you don't know Colapinto as a driver, listen again. Is he the quickest driver of all time or anything? No, not really. But he is quick enough, and critically, especially for like one of these junior drivers, I remember him to be a very like safe and reliable pair of hands. He is not one of those win it or bin it kind of drivers at all. He's there and he does his job, and he does his job quite well. So in that sense, he could suit Williams in this particular scenario quite well. One last piece of news, and this is just a happy story really, and that's Taylor Barnard now confirmed going to McLaren for Formula E next season. Not really a surprise given the mid-season, and obviously McLaren has already announced they're not going to keep Jack Hughes, so we did see this coming. Nonetheless, I am really happy for him. Obviously a driver struggling with budget, so again, getting the out of F2 immediately, making the jump to a properly paid professional career is super critical for him, and I'm sure he will have a long and glorious racing career in the years to come. Now, there was a lot more racing this week, obviously, but I chose to actually select a little more what we cover and what we won't cover. So I'm not going to be talking about Japan or the US stuff in this episode, time reasons as well. I will come back to this in the future, obviously, don't you worry. Maybe we will do an episode where we skip the European stuff. I want to chop and change a little more going forward, but I will still make sure to cover it all with the time it deserves. There will also be some sort of USF Juniors, USF 2000, USF Pro 2000 recap, but I don't know when. Might be an off-season thing, but don't you worry, I have not forgotten about our American junior drivers either. Anyway, that was it from me for this episode. Now is your time to let me know down in the comments what you make of Doohan and Colapinto in particular. These two moves do need to be discussed thoroughly. Otherwise, I'll thank you all for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one.